Hi there, everyone. I have with me Andrew Sykes, who I've known for many years. And I know Andrew is an expansive thinker and a voracious curator of knowledge. I also know that he likes getting into these Fight Club inspired sparring debates. Uh, and I think this is probably what underlies his uncanny ability of making connections and bringing things together. He's currently the CEO of Habits at Work and has been so for 15 years, I believe, and more recently also a professor at Kellogg and a transformation leader at Serenade. He's also one of the most generous people that I know. And so thank you, Andrew, for joining us here today.
Well, speaking of generous, that was a very kind and generous endorsement. Thank you so much. I'm thrilled to be here. And Fight Club is often a fight with yourself, but I'm looking forward to sparring with you.
There you go. You got it. For those who don't know, my name is Hanlie. I'm the founder of Virtuosity and Brat Lab, and creating exceptional teams and making change stick is at the heart of what we do. Recently, myself and my co-founder, Colin Bullen, posted a webinar about trust, and we had an overwhelming response. And so we thought we would talk to some other people who are specialists and experts in this field. And I know, Andrew, you have a Trust Talk, and you often speak about that. So I'm really looking forward to hearing more about that. But before we get going, perhaps you can tell me a little bit more about yourself, both at Habits at Work and at Kellogg Business School.
Well, I have the privilege of teaching at a business school, which is this wonderful opportunity of trying to blend deep research with professional speaking. Because when you're at that level of executive education, you expect both phenomenally rich research as well as an entertaining show. And I've been exploring the performing arts in the last 2 years. I have become what I call a performance poet. I'm not quite sure what it is, but I'm working on it. We have a book being published, myself and a good friend of mine, a photographer named Ernesto, who is doing wonderful work in this area. So that's interesting and quite new. But, Habits at Work has been focused on developing the most trusted salespeople in the world for a long, long time. And I think that means my work for my lifetime is cut out for me because, as I'm sure you know, and all your listeners do, salespeople are probably the least trustworthy professionals on the planet by reputation. I don't think that's true, but that's the gist of, I think, the conversation we're going to have is the difference between assessed trustworthiness and actual worthiness of trust.
Right. No, absolutely. And I think that's true what you say, that people have this this way of looking at salespeople that's very embedded and entrenched. And I think what you've been trying to do is to break that mold and to build a new perception of salespeople based in fact and truth about how they connect with people, I suppose.
Yes, and as we have this discussion, I think you'll see that what is a trust issue for salespeople turns out to be an issue for all of us as soon as we're in the business of trying to influence another human being. And show me a job where that's not a small to everything portion. I'll show you someone who doesn't need to be trusted.
Right, right. Now, so we often speak about trust, well, mostly we speak about trust in the context of teams. Like, how do we work together, especially if you're a new team or you're a swarm, to get together to quickly build trust and figure out how to also restore that if things go wrong. But I suspect that there may be a different approach or a different way of looking at when it comes to sales. Does that approach resonate with you, or do you do it completely differently?
I think it's the same whether you're in sales, in leadership, if you're in a team as a team member or leading a team. Trust is trust, and there are different types of trust. It can be domain specific. There's identity trust versus experiential trust. But I don't think that the context affects how you go about building trust, although I will say certain contexts make it more likely that you're deemed to be untrustworthy before you even open your mouth. Just imagine approaching someone on the street as a complete stranger with a clipboard in your hand, asking for a donation. That's an environment where you're deemed to be an interruptive stranger at best, or an annoying salesperson, or worse, at worst.
So are you saying that you think it's important to create the context or create a situation in which you can foster trust?
Yes, but I think that the prevailing context is the context of you and how you show up as a human being that makes it easy for other people to trust you. And I think that's really the gist of this conversation, is there is a big difference between being worthy of trust in fact and being deemed to be trustworthy in reality. And unless you're clear about that difference, I think you can spend your life indignant that you're integrous and disappointed that people don't deem you as trustworthy.
So in the beginning, you say that, there's this perception of salespeople not being trustworthy and that you're on a mission to change that. What do you think caused that in the first place, and how are you changing that?
Yeah, well, as I like to say to salespeople, and I'm a proud member of that clan, the reason we're not trusted is because we smell. By which I mean we have commission breath, or more correctly, people have an assumption about us that we're in it for the money, the commission, and to close a deal, that's all self-interested. And so we're assumed to be people who are to be viewed warily, handled carefully, and not trusted easily. Because all human beings, whether it's teams or in a sales environment, the first question they're asking themselves when they meet you is, who are you and what do you want? And if there is this sniff or this odor that maybe you're self-interested, trust plummets immediately. And it doesn't necessarily go to zero. It may be worse. It may go all the way to negative. Just think about how strongly you trust someone of a shady character to do the wrong things. So it's not like we don't trust salespeople at all. Sometimes we trust them to do the wrong things. And it's unfair most of the time. But in a world where everyone knows that salespeople earn commission, that's the status quo. I'll say this, whether you're a salesperson or a leader, you have a similar problem, because while salespeople are deemed to have commission as a motive, leaders are often judged to have a hidden agenda as a motive. Right. And they're equally off-putting for people unless they're revealed and understood.
Yeah, I recently read a piece of research exactly around that, that leadership is struggling at the moment, I think, to stabilize around trust or to gain trust. And it's also very quick to lose it. What, in your opinion, is the quickest way to build trust?
Well, the quickest way to build the assessment of trustworthiness is that someone meets you, and before they have real evidence that you are indeed worthy of trust, they make a false judgment or a judgment based on false signals. So first distinction, I think, is we think that what deserves to be trusted is telling the truth, having good intentions, and doing what you say you're going to do. And in a perfect world, that does deserve trust. And even in our actual world, that does deserve trust. But mostly, people have made an assumption about whether you're trustworthy or not before your intentions are revealed, before you've had a chance to do what you say you're going to do, and before they can discover if you tell the truth or not. So assessed trustworthiness is a judgment. And people will make them based on signals, often false. And so our prescription for people is take into account the research on trust that says other people will assess you as trustworthy or not in milliseconds to minutes after they first met you. And it's in the micro moments, not the grand gestures. And some of that happens before you even open your mouth, based on how you show up on LinkedIn or social media. Some of it happens in the nature of your presence. Do you look people in the eye and smile? And do you have an open body posture, or are you closed and hidden and looking from side to side like you're shifty? But I think the fastest way to build trust is to answer the question that people are asking about you. Who are you and what do you want? And most of us, when we introduce ourselves, talk about what we've done, a name, rank, serial number, job positions, and we try and show that we're trustworthy by demonstrating a history of credibility. when I believe that what makes people really trust you quickly is understanding your motive. And so one of the things I ask leaders and salespeople to do is to define and polish and practice their personal origin story. An answer to the question, let's go around the room and introduce ourselves, but that is told in a very small story format, at the heart of which is the reason why you do what you do and the impact that you have as a result, not job title and how you do what you do.
Right. It has a function of what we call lowering the waterline, right? Like people get to know you personally, I suppose, which also makes me wonder two things. The one thing is, what is the role of likability in trust then? Because it sounds like you're also trying to get people to like you, or am I misreading that?
I've spent much time on this subject with a couple of fellow researchers who have different opinions, so I'll tell you mine, that they are cousins. And it's very true, I think, that we tend to like people that we trust, and we tend to trust people that we like, but they are different. But if you look at the opposite, I think the starkness becomes quite clear, which is it's very seldom that we like someone we don't trust, and very seldom that we trust someone that we don't like. But they are separate. And I think a great example of where the separateness shows up is, think of some of your family members. You may not just like them, but love them. But in certain domains, you might not trust them. For example, my dad was a wonderful human being, loved him, but I wouldn't trust him as my personal financial advisor. I would have trusted him in many other areas. And that's one of the insights around trust. It is a domain-specific phenomenon as well as a generic phenomenon. So we can trust people at a certain level, but trust them more for one thing and less for another.
Right, right. And the other thing that came up for me is we do a lot of cross-cultural work because we work multinationally. And your comment about, for example, body language or how you look at someone, do you not think that there is a difference between how you build trust in one culture to another?
Massively. And I should have been more complete with my answer. Not in all cultures is eye contact a sign of respect and trust. In fact, in some, it's a sign of disrespect and will break trust. There are some cultures, for example, when I lived in Sao Paulo, where 30 or 40 minutes of small talk and discussion about family and how things are going is how every meeting starts. And without it, it feels rushed and aggressive. Whereas living now in America, it's very often the case that small talk is small in time. And in 5 minutes, we're getting down to things. And someone who waxes lyrical for half an hour may lose trust because they signal this person isn't quite serious about business. So I think there is a massive overlay of cultural differences in how trust is given, assessed, and earned. But I also think that one of the things that has us mistrust people of different genders and age and cultures is this perception that we're so different. So one of the antidotes to that is asking what I call connection questions, questions other than how are you and how's the weather and where do you find yourself today? Questions like, what's your favorite book and why? Or what was your favorite vacation you ever went on and what made it special? Because I think what that does is it surfaces our common humanity. And I don't think as humans, it takes very many data points for me to say, Hanlie, you have a different book than my favorite book, but we're both readers. And you had a different vacation experience than mine, but we both had one. And in 2 or 3 of those commonly surfaced experiences, I think we very quickly say, we're the same person. And isn't that universally true? Most humans are pretty similar underneath our meat suits and masks anyway.
It's funny that you say that because somewhere I read also when it comes to different cultures is like with the Finns, don't start a meeting without coffee. So that's a good one to keep in mind. Which
there are a couple of cultures like that, the result of which is I've started meetings with the shakes and it felt like it was the right thing to do.
Exactly. So those are sort of little rules of thumbs or heuristics that you can perhaps use to quickly connect. Are there any other 1 or 2 techniques that you can share with people who perhaps aren't salespeople, but are in a selling role, for example, that they can use or pull out of their back pocket when they need it to when they're connecting with people?
Yes, I think the golden rule is that if you're in sales or leadership or influence, a consultant, a physician, and you're trying to get people to change their mind, the golden rule for me is first humans decide whom to trust, and that determines what we believe. And the order matters. We don't trust people who are very competent. We trust the competence of people who have earned our trust already. And, I do a simple exercise with my students at Kellogg, which is I ask them to draw a pie chart representing the, say, 20 billion facts that each of us know, like 2 + 2 = 4, or climate change is real. And then I ask the question, what percentage of all of those facts that you discovered firsthand? Like you flew to the North Pole, you drilled the ice core, you did the analysis, and you come to the conclusion climate change is real. Or did you read a book? Did you watch a YouTube video? Did you go to a class? Did you learn it from your parents? And in my case, the proportion is some very, very small percentage under 1. And I think that proves, in a sense, the rule. First, we decide whom to trust, and that determines what we believe. So my first nugget is, you've got one job as a leader, salesperson, influencer, consultant, is allow people to trust you. How do you do that? The way you show up, the promises you make, you're sharing your origin story, asking connection questions, being open and transparent about what your motives are, whether it's in your origin story or just declaring them. But I also think that after that initial 5 minutes that I call the platinum 5 minutes, we do also make a big mistake when we're trying to grow trust over time. And that's in the area of how we make and keep promises. If you'll indulge me, I think that most of us as humans, we make fairly messy promises in the first place.
No.
And even if we keep them, we're then indignant when people are not fully thrilled. Because what we miss is, when I make you a promise, there is almost always unspoken expectations that you have that you will judge me on unfairly. But we're all human and we'll all do it. And those expectations change over time. So if I promise you X, but you expect Y, and I deliver X, you'll be disappointed. And I'm left thinking, what happened here? Right. So I have labeled it the habit of making responsible promises, which is, rather than just making a clean promise, here's what I'll do, by when and how, with what updates. I always now follow my promises with this question: Hanlie, what else do you expect me to do? Or what else do you trust me to do? And oftentimes people don't have an initial answer, so I may seed the conversation. For example, do you expect me to print and bind the report? Do you expect me to give you an update on Tuesday night so you're not stressing about it on Thursday just before your meeting? Do you expect me to behave in a certain way? And I also then ask the question, I would say, Hanlie, I'm clear your expectations may change because the world changes quickly. Are you okay if I check in a week from now to see if you have any new expectations? And so for the first time, I can take your expectations, my stated promise, and through a conversation, maybe a negotiation, close the gap. And I think that's the way that you can be the most trustworthy person in every room every day, making these responsible promises.
And I think that's that's some great wisdom there that I think also matters in teams, that also is underpinned, I think, by the commitment to communicate very clearly when it comes to what our expectations of each other are and how we're going to deliver what we've agreed is going to be delivered. So I think that's a nice loop to take us to the close. So thank you very much for sharing your wisdom. We will certainly share how to get hold of you in the chat below. So please have a look at that. And if you're interested in doing some of our courses around teams and creating exceptional teams, the link is right here.
Awesome.
Andrew, thank you so much.
Thank you for trusting me to be on your show. And you are one of the people that I trust more than anyone in the world. So it's been my privilege.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Andrew. Take care.